So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is technically the map that is Caerith or Cirith Ungol. I can never really remember how to pronounce that. I've been told before, but I just keep forgetting. But fortunately, for my own sanity, the fortress itself has actually been removed on this version of the map, which is probably for the best because it kind of worked mechanically very strangely, where if the fortress itself got damaged at all, the frame rate would start to deteriorate over the course of the battle. And it wasn't in the normal way either. It wasn't in the way that rangers can cause the frame rate to drop. It was sort of like a constant, slow reduction in the frame rate as the walls slowly crumbled, I think was the problem. Weird. Anyway, regardless, it's not something we have to worry about this time because the fortress itself has actually been removed, but the base of the map remains the same. And so without the fortress in the middle, it takes on more of a mountain pass type deal, which should be fairly interesting, to be fair. And it does look as though it's a mostly evil showdown today, as Mordor and the few servants they have that they're able to rally to their banner again are going to be defending their mountain range as many of the other forces of evil close in on them to try and take away Sauron's crown. So this should be fairly interesting because, again, with mostly evil factions on display, it's probably going to be quite an aggressive fight in spite of the fact that there's rather narrow choke points. And there's going to be probably lots of death on both sides. But we'll start off with what will be the de facto attackers because they have an army advantage in this particular battle, the blue team. And this battle was sent to me by MSQ2, who's going to be playing as Angmar. So we can see, of course, he's got some Barrow Wights on the front line. Fairly slow moving, obviously we all know what the Barrow Wights are all about. If they can get into a really grindy melee engagement, they can be really, really annoying to deal with for the opposition. And they give you a lot of margin for error as Angmar. You can't rely on them too much, but you can certainly depend on them to take a great deal of punishment. He's also gone for some Goblin Band, a lot of Goblin Band and Snaga Stalkers actually. I wonder why he's gone for 4 units of Goblin Band here. That's a very interesting choice, as well as obviously the 3 unit of Snaga Stalkers. So a lot of trash. They're not going to last too long in melee. He needs to support them properly, but I don't know, in a situation like this I feel as though Angmar going more for their quality would maybe be the optimal way to play, but I'm kind of glad to see Angmar maybe dipping into some of their low tier fodder units, because it's not something you often see, it's something you more expect from Mordor or the Misty Mountains. A couple of units of Gundabad Guard, obviously heavy spearmen with their big shields, very, very resilient, very tough. Gone for some trolls as well, some trolls of Angmar and some trolls of Gundabad, so both of the heavy trolls. And then at the back here he's gone for some Blackwatch Legion, and in and amongst there there's also the Hammer Guard and the Black Guard. So he's gone for the really high tier elites in terms of infantry and trolls, and also some low tier fodder. So this is actually definitely the sort of thing you'd expect to see from Mordor more than Angmar, sort of that low tier, high tier split, whereas Angmar have got a little bit more in the middle, which they normally depend on. But MSQ has gone for something a little bit different here, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out for him. Then we have Sin of the Dark Cloud, who's going to be playing as Numenor. Not too surprising there. If he's not playing as either Numenor or Umbar, I start to get a little bit concerned that it's not actually Sin. He's gone for some Remena Abarim and some Belagai footmen, so just a single unit of Belagai here on the front. Lots of Remena Abarim as well. Again, not too surprising to see them in this sort of situation. They will, of course, lay a lot of quality, especially seeing as Angmar have not gone for so much quality. The interplay between these two factions could be quite interesting. We'll see how that goes. Dunaim Shadowbows, Rangers, so if they can get into the right position, attackers are always in a fantastic position if they can get their Rangers into play. Some Pharazim Swordmasters, this is pre-hotfix, so the Pharazim Swordmasters still sit at 2 hit points, so they're going to be quite happy there. Seafarers of Nindamos are still their destructive selves, however, as it is pre-hotfix, so it's obviously something Numenor can lean quite heavily on. But they do need to get into range first and foremost. It'll be interesting to see how much damage they take on the approach. Belagai are archers, Remena Bawabrim as well, so some skirmishers, and also some Royal Legion of Armenelos and some Naru Naaru Sentinels. So fairly standard by the book kind of Numenor army, I would say. Much more focused on quality than the Angmar force. Then we have Harad, played by the Camping Panda. Harad are a faction we actually seem to see a bit less of nowadays, which is kind of interesting. Haradrim Spearmen and Archers, so they're just out in front here, the low tier units, which will be the first to engage. The rest of his army is a long way back, however. Mahud Beast Hunters, so Javelins are of course something Harad can really, really depend on in most situations. Obviously more so with their Demons of the Desert because of how destructive that single unit can be. I actually think Angmar do have Witches somewhere as well now that I come to think of it, but we didn't actually see them. Dismounted Serpent Guard with the armour upgrade. We've got some Trollmen of Harad. The Trollmen units, especially pre-hotfix here, are going to be a very important aspect to their army. Demons of the Desert, Post hotfix Harad are maybe a little bit less dependent on the Trollmen, but they're still as devastating as they were, so you can still expect to see them a lot. Champions of Nafrat, one of the most devastating units of AP shock infantry in the game, definitely especially when you use them in conjunction with a lot of other Harad's aggressive tools. Southron Pikes and Mahud Beast Tamers in large quantities, so a lot of Phalanx units again, if they can be used later on, especially with the AP they offer, could be really, really damaging. Haradrim Archers and Spearmen, more Serpent Guard and more Trollmen. And then finally, the last attacking army going to be the Misty Mountains, played by MP Bekami 13. Goblin Infantry here at the back, a free unit with his general in, so he's definitely of the WK school of thought, where you put your general in the lowest tier unit you have, leave them at the back, and then you can use your elites a little bit more readily. But obviously it does have the downside of putting your general in a much more vulnerable position if they do get caught in melee, so it is a trade-off. Drake Broodlings, be interesting to see how they're used. If they get caught by the right kind of unit, they can be killed very quickly. They are a very interesting unit though, in the sense that I think it's more of a bug than anything, but when they're in melee their charge bonus remains constant, so they can effectively they get the benefit of their charge bonus while they're still in melee after the charge is finished. I'm not sure that's intentional, but it is something that can happen and something I have seen before. Snow Trolls, maybe not as devastating as the Angmar offerings we've seen already, but they are still nonetheless very dangerous. Heavy Goblin Crossbows, so crossbows, very useful tool in this sort of situation. Heavy Goblin Archers, huge amount of Heavy Goblin Spears, and there's no Halberds in there I don't think. But there are Black Uruks of the Mountains. Again, this is pre-hotfix, so the shock infantry is not quite up to the level it will be then, or at least not quite as efficient as it will be then with the reduction in cost for most of them. But the Black Uruks of the Mountains, as they are still a good unit, to be honest with you, for the Misty Mountains, because they make up for some deficiencies they have elsewhere. There's some Mountain Uruk Host in there, some Goblin Archers, more Heavy Goblin Crossbows, and of course the Drummers. Now we shall move on to the Defenders, the red team. First of all, we have Sigma Cyphers, who is the one player who's not playing as an evil faction today, so really breaking the theme a little bit, but I suppose we can just justify it by saying that Cardolan have been enslaved by Sauron and they're being pressed into service here against the rebellion. Greenway Garrison Footmen here, so cheap pikes, to be fair, should be a really useful tool to use against the Misty Mountains, because it'll either force them to use their crossbows on a target they'd rather not, or they'll have to try and just smash them down from the front with sheer numbers, which can be risky, because if you don't make it, the pikes can hold you in place and slowly bleed you out. Minhiriath Archers should be good in a skirmish fight, more than capable of holding the Misty Mountains at bay anyway. Greenway Garrison Footmen and Spears, so going a little bit more for numbers here, interestingly enough, which is a strange way to approach this battle considering the situation they're in. Greenway Garrison Archers, also some Minhiriath Men-at-Arms, lots of crossbows though, so that's actually, I think that's 2 units of Minhiriath Sharpshooters only, but he's also gone for the upgraded Minotaur End Guardians as well, so the full complement of crossbows will be incredibly important in this Battle of Cardolan to have success. Dúnedain Captains here, Wardens of Tir and Gorthad, and the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, all capable of buffing the morale of the troops around them, which will be very, very important of course for Cardolan, especially up against some fear-causing units from the other side. Minhiriath Spears at the back as well as an auxiliary unit. We also have Khand, played by the Vengeful One. He's gone for the Brotherhood of the Wain, my personal favourite chariot unit, because they have the most numbers, which, considering how chariots can often fall away and their strength can be drained if they get caught, it's good to have a little bit more margin for error there, and of course the crossbows that they use. It may look like a Chukonu, but it is not rapid fire. We also have some Chieftains Vanguard and some Nurad Windblades, so Nurad Windblades with incredibly quick, effectively melee knights. They don't have a shield and they're not quite as resilient as other melee knights, but they're every bit as damaging in melee. And we have some Chieftains Vanguard, which are of course an incredibly tanky unit of horse archers. They focus a little bit more on defence in comparison to something like the Riders of the Golden Wood from Lothlorien. I really like the armour on these guys as well. I've always quite liked the like human style masks that they wear. The rest of the Khandish army, however, is probably going to be on foot given the situation. Nurad Halberds and Footmen are going to make up the bulk of the front line, which is very understandable, very efficient units. Halberds over here, the Hwacha, which again we've seen the Hwacha be useful recently. It wasn't enough to give them the win on their Edoras map where the Hwacha was used effectively, but that was not the Hwacha's fault. It certainly played its part in that particular battle. Nomadic Marauders, cheap javelins, very, very useful, especially with the enemy having to advance into you. Brotherhood of the Axe and Nurad Stormguard, so some higher end AP units, as well as some lower end AP units in the shape of the Nomadic Axemen. Some Nomadic Raiders over here as well. Variag Warriors with the armour upgrade as well, so that'll make them a little bit more durable, although if they go up against the likes of Numenor, the quality will still overwhelm them, but if they go up against the lower tier orcs, they should be at home, to be honest with you. Variag Bowmen also with the armour upgrade, making them just that little bit better in a skirmish fight than they already were. And that is pretty much it. And the final army is the Steward of Dale, who's going to be playing as Mordor. He's got some Sauron's Will, some nice AP troops. Morannon archers are over here as well, so again, just sort of basic skirmishers. Bulldogs, armour-piercing bodyguard units, very, very useful to have. Temple Guard, Temple Guard, they've got a nice gap that they can use here to shoot their AP arrows through. Orc Javelins are over here. We also have some standard Orc Archers, so a lot of skirmishers here for Mordor, which they can bring, even though they're not that high quality. Orc Fodder, Morannon Guard, and is that Halberdiers? It is, so again, basic units. Mordor are going to be relying on their bread and butter more so than their elites here, I think. Nazgul are still here, of course. If you bring no elites as Mordor, you're in massive trouble, but it just depends on how deeply you want to delve into your coffers to actually field a lot of them. Sauron's Will, Orc Javelins, Olag High, and then at the back more Morannon units. So yeah, a very large quantity of Morannon units. Could be some Rangers here and there for Mordor. There's actually some units way back there as well. Some Melkor's Chosen as well, so some mounted divisions over here. It'll be interesting to see how they're used. And actually there's another unit over here as well from Khan, just a unit of Nurad footmen that Benjamin probably forgot to move at the right time. But without further ado, let's begin. Fairly long battle this, as you would expect from a situation like this. Like, this is really another one of those pseudo-siege battles where there isn't anything in the way of buildings or man-made or orc-made fortifications. But it's a natural fortress, this. Even with the walls of Caerhun and Gol gone, you still have to use the very plentiful defensive terrain that you have available to you. Especially considering that you have a bit of a numbers disadvantage, and to be honest with you, the quality is not higher in any way on the team of 3, so I would definitely back the team of 4 here to win this one. I feel as though they go into this with a fairly healthy advantage, to be honest with you. Especially considering the mix of quantity and quality they have on both sides, to be honest. Harad, with their trollmen and their higher end units in general, are going to be very, very difficult to break down alongside the more heavily armoured but nonetheless lower quality legions from the Orcs, the Misty Mountains, crashing into Cardolan. They will have the crossbows to contend with, but it's over here, I think, where the defenders are going to struggle most of all, because they're going to have to deal with a combination of Angmar's numbers and Numenor's quality, which is not something I believe the basic Morannon units from Mordor are going to be capable of doing, to be honest with you. But we'll see. Defensive terrain can count for a lot, and if they get armour-piercing archers and rangers into a good position, obviously that will be the great equaliser for Mordor. But they're also going to need to get into a much better shape than this, I would think. They're sort of getting into a densely packed formation over here, but that will cut them off from their allies if they're not careful. But yeah, I think Khand and Cardolan are in maybe a little bit better of a position, both composition-wise and positionally, to actually deal with the situation at hand. Greenway Garrison Spearmen are going to need to retreat in the other direction. It'll be interesting to see how the mounted units are used as well. The Melkor's Chosen and all of the units that Khand have brought are not cheap by any means. And I'm a little bit confused as to why the Windblades have been brought. I think the Variag Cataphracts would have been the better choice here. They're more heavily armoured, they're shielded, so they're going to be able to deal with being zoned out by cavalry a lot more, and they're more devastating with the charge, which is undoubtedly what these units are going to be used for now, because there really isn't anything in the way of mounted units on the other side for the Windblades to deal with. But perhaps they were hoping that the Windblades would just act as a bit of an escort for the Brotherhood of the Wain and the Chieftains Vanguard. I can see the thinking behind that, but considering the kind of map it was, I would still have been comfortable letting Variag Cataphracts do that. Even if they're a little bit more expensive, I think it would have been worthwhile to maybe stump up a little bit extra for the potential devastation that knights can inflict on your opponent. So yeah, Angmar, of course, are going to be leading the way, as is right in this situation. You definitely want to be, if you're Angmar in this situation, considering the army that you brought, you want to be the ones taking the hits and not Numenor. If you can deliver Numenor to the front line intact, then you can let their quality do the work against Mordor. Because I really don't think Mordor have got enough quality to withstand this kind of push. Certainly not without some pretty significant help from Khan, anyway. And even then, that's going to be fairly difficult to get a cost-effective engagement out of. Like, these are the two, like, the pairings of units we're seeing for Mordor. A combination of Morannon Guard and Morannon Halberds. Relatively cheap, relatively cost-effective against the right opponents as well, but when the quality discrepancy is this large, I do worry for what Mordor is actually going to be able to accomplish here. But we shall see, won't we? Over here, meanwhile, Harad's starting to move forward. I mean, this isn't really the best idea for the Camping Panda, because he's going to allow here the Windblades to charge in. He kind of lost his bottle a little bit there, the Vengeful one. If he followed through with that charge, I mean, this is only Haradrim Spearmen. Militia Spears, to be brutally honest, if you can get a charge off and charge back out quickly, you're going to be fine against them. And the Nurad Windblades are a very slippery unit. Very, very quick, very easy to charge in and out. Of course, the problem here is if they do stay in range of the basic Harad archers, when their hit points are gone, they will fall away pretty quickly, to be honest with you. Over here, meanwhile, it's going to be a long march here for the Misty Mountains to get into position. And interestingly enough, I mean, with Cardolan and Khan sort of consolidating their forces over on this side, if they can go over to support Mordor as well, it starts to look like a little bit better of a situation for them. I do think Khan needs to send over more. Adunheim Shadowbows and the Steward of Dale are going to make their way over as well. But I actually think the blue team's best hope here is to move in as quickly as they possibly can against Mordor before reinforcements can get over here. Because you can do terminal damage, really, before any reinforcements get a chance to actually shore up this position, especially considering the rather unorthodox formation that the Steward of Dale has struck up over here. Because, again, you can cut them off, potentially. Melkor's chosen here to make sure he can't just send up a couple of lower tier units without getting charged, but considering most of your lower tier units are actually spearmen, they will still be devastated off the charge by the Melkor's chosen, but it may not be as good a target as they were hoping for initially. So Khan here, it's quite obvious here that Khan are not going to use their cavalry early, which I actually think is the right idea. What I would do if I were Khan, though, is maybe sequester your cavalry away back here. Because the Misty Mountains, they could come up here and try and chase you down, but it's kind of... I don't think that would be what they would want to do, so even if they do that, it's sort of pulling them off of what they would originally plan to do. But also, you need to save your cavalry till the end here, I think. Cavalry and chariots at the end, when the blue team are maybe a little bit lighter on manpower, I think that would be the play here. While these nomadic axemen are getting run over by their own chariot men. No losses will be taken, of course, but even so, inconvenienced. Meanwhile, the fight is getting closer, but it's definitely a slow burn so far. A large portion of the Numenor army is going around this side. Interesting to see how they decide to approach things. There's a couple of, again, like Moran-on Halberds and Moran-on Guard forming up these front lines. It's not going to be enough if Numenor decide to concentrate their force by any means. Brotherhood of the Wain are on their way over here as well. I mean, I wouldn't send them forward on their lonesome immediately. Did that one just fall off the cliff? Is there a Brotherhood of the Wain down here? No. I thought one of them just plummeted off the edge, but that would have been most unfortunate. Here they go. They are going to charge in here. They need to be a little bit careful. If they do get bogged down, it's going to be a real waste of a unit which could potentially be so useful in the late game. But they can use their projectiles to good effect. That's the one thing that these mounted crossbows do have to their favour. Melkor's chosen are going to move forward. They've pulled the Goblin Band out of position a little bit. I mean, it does kind of surprise me that people are like so deathly afraid of these lower tier. What are those units that are firing at them? There's definitely some arrows finding their marks. It's the Temple Guard. They need to get off fire at will right now. I thought it was Orc Archers. They are off fire at will now, thank goodness, because you really don't want to be wasting resources like this early on, because like I said, it's all for the defenders to try and do here, to try and withstand this pressure. But as I was saying, it's kind of surprising to me that people pull out of charges against these lower tier units, like Goblin Band. Because like a full-blooded charge is still going to do devastating damage, and you can easily get away from them. They don't do a lot of damage, even if it is anti-cav damage. But people, they're not eager. I can understand why. I mean, I suppose it is good practice to not charge into spearmen, but I don't know. I feel as though they could have followed through on that one with the Melkor's chosen. Orc fodder against Goblin Band. The Orc fodder is further away from its support than the Goblin Band is from their support, so obviously this is a bit of a foregone conclusion. It's going to be a win for the Goblin Band, and again, I'm never a big fan of this. I'm never a big fan of just sending forward a single unit of fodder to be thrown under the bus like this, because it doesn't really accomplish anything. Like, yes, it's not your best unit, you don't really need to safeguard their lives that much, but if you throw them in like this, they're not really going to do much of anything. And you can see here that even a unit as low tier as the Goblin Band is relatively comfortable in melee with the Orc fodder. Like, they need to be a meat shield for a unit that's better than them. And again, I'm surprised the Steward of Dale is doing this, because a player with that much experience you'd expect to know a little bit better, to be honest, but c'est la vie. Raj March is moving in, so a little bit more pressure coming down now. Over here, the Greenway Garrison Archers are going to open up immediately. Make sure, obviously this is one of the benefits to going low tier. If you're on the defense, you can more freely use your units and not have to try and save them and allow the attackers to dictate the pace of the engagement. You can immediately start using your archers, and the Haradrim Archers obviously not going to enjoy that particular treatment. Mahud Beast Hunters moving forward, so Harad getting into position, and I think over here they are going to be waiting more than anything for the Misty Mountains to get into position on the back edge of the settlement. But they're very prepared over here. Like I said, I think Harad and the Misty Mountains are going to struggle a little bit more over on this side against the combined efforts of Khan and Cardolan than over on this side. I think this is where the battle can be won, potentially, for the attackers. And still, the Steward of Dale doesn't seem to be doing a particularly great job, to be honest with you, at getting his forces into position. Like, this has got panic written all over it, I think, because like he's got these units over here. If Sin really wanted to at this point, he could move forward, force an engagement over here, and those units would then be unable to retreat. And with Angmar slowly pushing forward, they'd be cut off. So he needs to be very, very careful here, the Steward of Dale, otherwise he's going to lose whole swathes of his army, which is not what you need as the defenders, especially considering the situation. In come the Moranon Guard, trying to back up the Orc fodder, so at the very least he's backing these forces up, and the Goblin Band will lose to Moranon Guard at the very least, but needless losses, strange formations. I don't know. And again, Narun Aru Sentinels and Romena Abarim, so Sin sees the situation as it is. Belagair Archers shooting in point blank to these Moranon, and with Halberdiers on the front line, he doesn't want to just send in his Romena, because they will take more losses than is needed. He's going to send in the Pikes to make sure these Halberdiers are going to be much less efficient, and obviously Halberd to Pike. The Pike is going to win here, especially a high quality one like the Narun Aru Sentinels. And the Romena Abarim in close quarters against the Moranon Guard, that is going to be a very one-sided engagement indeed. Nazgul are on the way over though, so I mean the Steward of Dale, I mean with these units being committed, what the Steward of Dale is going to need is to continue to commit to this very outer defence that he has, because he sent in a lot of value already in just the Nazgul to hold on to these positions, and now he's going to need to sort of continue to make good on that. Meanwhile, Nomadic Raiders moving forward, Haradrim Spearmen charging in to sort of, I'm not sure why these Nomadic Raiders came this far forward, to be honest with you, but there they are. They've been caught in melee by Haradrim Spearmen, and they're going to have to be bailed out by Greenway Garrison Spearmen and Nurad Halberds. Greenway Garrison Archers in the back as well. Still a lot of arrows coming in. Mahud Beast Hunters moving into position, trying to use their javelins, which against something like the Nurad Halberds is probably worthwhile, because they're going to form quite an important pillar in the defence over on this side of things anyway. Yeah, and there they go, look. Nice javelin volley. And that's going to do significant damage, and yeah, a bit of a misplay, I have to say, to come forward like this at the very least. But the Watcher's here, and the Watcher's doing damage. It's getting a bit of friendly fire as well, but it's certainly doing some decent damage here to the scattered ranks of the attackers as the screen continues to shake. Snaga Skirmishers taking losses, Haradrim Archers. Nothing too important is taking losses though, that may be a bit of a problem. Heavy Goblin Infantry and Heavy Goblin Spears. Yeah, like it's nothing overly important to the attackers that is, but it will give the attackers something to think about, and it definitely does soften them up. Especially the Mahud Beast Tamers there, they took a couple of pretty decent volleys. Mountaineer at Coast getting in here as well with the Haradrim Spearmen. It's going to take a lot more than a single unit of depleted Greenway Garrison Spears to hold on to this line as well. They are getting backed up by archers, but it's not archers of any really genuine quality, to be honest with you. The Misty Mountain's getting ready for an assault down here as well, but not the entirety of their army, so will they have the manpower to make decent gains there? Blackwatch Legion coming in, seeing the thinness of the defence over here, and the Moranon Guard are going to be bulldozed out the way, so now the Steward of Dale, he needs to make decisions yet again. Khan are going to have to come over here to bail him out, I think. Because again, I didn't like the look of this defence, and I think I'm being vindicated in my views here, because I think he's spread himself too thin. His formation hasn't been thought through enough, and I think this is going to be a big problem for him. Olag Kai are moving in to try and help shore up the line. Seafarers of Nindamos over here, however. Carnage on both sides, it would have to be said, but that's going to favour the attackers a little bit more. And the Olag Kai may be in here, but I suppose there's not a lot of Remnant of Arim left. What happened to the Nazgul would be my question. They're in here still at full strength as well. So Sin, he will take more losses going through here than maybe he would have initially hoped, but to be honest with you, I think the attackers can afford to be fairly pleased with how things have gone so far. They're quite fortunate in a way though that, well, quite unfortunate I suppose, that Khan have arrived in time to save them. Bail them out a little bit. The Nurad Halberds are here. I'm not really sure what the Brotherhood of the Wain are hoping to accomplish here, charging into the Trolls of Angmar like this, because in close quarters the Trolls are going to have a field day against these chariots. If the chariots aren't moving, then that's a really bad thing for them. The Dunaim Shadowbows are here though, so this is where Mordor can start to make up a bit of lost ground. There are the Witchers though, doing some nice damage in there, but again, that's only against nomadic axemen, to be honest with you. Like, they may have hit a chariot or two as well, but the chariots are no danger to anyone if they're getting bogged down in melee with trolls, so I mean, yeah, it looked showy, but maybe not the best volley of Witchers that we've ever seen. Dunaim Shadowbows, however, they're going to be able to rack up a nice kill count for themselves. Melkor's chosen. It's already a bit of a chaotic engagement over here, which again usually favours the attackers when they have a numbers advantage like this. Nurad footmen coming in to help. I'm glad that Khan have come over here to help Mordor, because with how wide their defence was cast, they did need some of the support from Khan over here, and I'm glad to see that it has been forthcoming. Rangers doing business for both teams at this point. This attack, meanwhile, well, I suppose the attack hasn't stopped, it's just the forward defence has been pulled back a little bit. And Cardolan and Khan are by no means obligated to move forward into the attackers, so they can just sit here and wait. What will the Misty Mountains and Harad do? I mean, there's multiple avenues they could go down, but again, this I think is the sign of a player that hasn't been playing the game too much. Like, these units are no good to anyone way back here. And this is a fairly serious misplay actually, because when they need to move forward, Harad and the Misty Mountains, they need to be ready to move forward in force. And the fact that his army is so stretched, that could be a big problem for the Misty Mountains especially, because they could be the ones to pay the ultimate price for that. But we'll see. That will be a discussion for later on. Over here, meanwhile, the arrival of Khan has stabilised things over here for the defenders. The Saurons will have moved forward as well. They're going to be able to lay down a lot of AP damage. The Blackwatch Legion have been committed a little bit too far forwards perhaps. The Nurad Halberds now able to lay down a bit of AP damage, but still, wounds have certainly been inflicted on the defenders here. The Melkor's chosen, trying to do the business against the Trolls in just sustained melee. That may not be the best place for them. If they can charge out and then charge back in, that might be for the best. The Dunaim Shadowbows still here, causing the Snaga Stalkers to break. You don't really want to be using... Well, I guess they were trying to save their javelins, but to use ranger ammunition on Snaga Stalkers. Routing units as well, around on Halberdiers. Remnant of Barim routing as well. I mean, if the Misty Mountains really wanted to, they could come right the way around here as well. Give Mordor yet another headache, but I feel as though they will be wanting to move more directly into Cardolan, because times are wasting. Nurad footmen electing not to follow the Mordor units into this engagement over here. I'm really puzzled as to why Mordor thought this was a good idea as well, to chase Numenor this far, to put yourself at the mercy of the Pharazim Swordmasters and the Royal Legion of Armenelos when they have all of these supporting units at their disposal. It's a good position for the Seafarers as well. Again, bit of a misplay in my opinion, but we'll see if it proves to be a serious misplay or not as the battle continues. What we got going on over here? Barrow-White's still here. The Melkor's chosen, delving maybe a little bit too deeply and greedily into the enemy lines, because the Gundabad Guard are here. These spearmen are going to be able to do a decent job. Like I said before, charging into spears can sometimes be justified. This is not one of those times, because they're not exposed. They have plenty of reinforcements around them. You're much more likely to get caught on all of these units, and you will now, because the Goblin Band are behind you. You've got nowhere to retreat. So yeah, these Melkor's chosen, once again, have been wasted. It's been an uncharacteristically poor showing, I have to say, from the Steward of Dale so far. Very, very strange indeed. Orc Javelins, again, flying a little bit too close to the sun, in melee with the Trolls. And what does the Steward of Dale do now? Do they... It looks like they're doubling down on this. Looks like they are going to commit more units in here to try and salvage this situation. But for me, definitely a battle so far where the attackers have had some pretty good fortune. I think the attackers, they haven't done anything wrong by any means, but I do think it's more poor play from the defenders, more so than anything that has contributed here. I mean, to be fair, with Ranger Fire and the arrows from the Temple Guard, they have been racking up a kill count, I'm sure, Mordor, but you always get a feeling for sort of like the strength of the defending lines, and I just don't feel as though it's really there at this point. And like I said, it was really all for them to do. Harad are now moving forward. Chieftains Vanguard getting a little bit closer. Again, good armour, but they are getting shot. Chieftains Vanguard may be a little bit too close, but again, when a situation like this, where you're trying to micro on both sides of the battle, I do have a little bit of sympathy for Khand. But if I were the Chieftains Vanguard, it would be now would be the time to sort of roll yourself back a little bit. Make sure you don't get caught by spears as well as being shot at by archers. Because in come the Beast Tamers and the Haradrim Spearmen. The Nomadic Raiders are on the front as well. Again, it's all happening for Khand. But in come the Nurads. The Nurads should be quite at home really in this fight. They should be just fine. We'll see how they do. The Misty Mountains are also coming forward in a big way. The Erinvorn Axemen revealing themselves, so a hidden unit of low tier shock infantry. The AP will be useful, but again, in terms of sheer numbers, the Misty Mountains are just hoping to batter their way through this Cardolan front line. And they will succeed if no more reinforcements are forthcoming, or no more support is forthcoming. I mean, archers are trying to do their best. Beriag bowmen are shooting in. Harad maybe have got the harder task here, as the Misty Mountains already have some wind in their sails. The momentum is with them a little bit more. In come the Drake Broodlings, doing a lot of damage to the Greenway Garrison Spearmen off a charge. Kind of similar mechanically, I suppose, or at least the idea would be similar mechanically to chariots, but I mean, they're in here. Warns of Tir Gorthad, like, the problem here is just support. Like, Cardolan don't have enough support on the front line. It's been a bit of a theme in this battle so far. Like, the attackers have been taking some fairly grievous losses as they move forward, but the defenders just don't have the numbers in any one of their defensive positions to have a genuine advantage really anywhere. In come the Trolls as well, so the Misty Mountains, good work from MP Beckamy now. He's committing forward in a big way now, and he's putting the defenders under a lot of pressure, and the defenders haven't really coped with that pressure all that well, to my mind. Their crossbows are too far away, I think, which would have been one of their main ways to respond to this pressure. And this is bad. This is bad news. For the defenders, anyway. Nurad Halberd, I mean, over here, this is probably where the defenders are having the most joy. Up against Harad on the front line, but I say that, as soon as I say that, I see Trollmen infiltrating the back lines. Yeah, this fight is going against them as well. I mean, front on it was fine, but they left gaps in the side, and you can see now Harad spilling over the sides, and I feel as though this has already got the hallmarks of one of those fights where it will probably end up being quite close in terms of kill count, but all throughout the battle I feel as though the attacks are probably going to have the advantage here, and I don't feel as though the defenders are in all that good a position to try and salvage this. Nurad Stormguard being committed forward again. It's been a battle of really puzzling choices for the defenders, because they've consistently committed forward units, important units, into situations where they weren't really going to be able to accomplish all that much. It's just a very weird way to play the game. Here are the Moranons, though, doing their best to try and halt the momentum of Numenor, but they're going to struggle with that, to be brutally honest. I mean, Numenor, when they get rolling, if they're allowed to really exert themselves in terms of quality, it's going to be tough for them. They still have a few units in reserve back here, but Moranon archers, Sauron's will, like, not enough really. Chariots are long gone, so they can't even bring that forward in the late game. How do they deal with this situation now? I mean, the Drake Broodlings have died, as is to be expected. The Trolls have also stopped, so the momentum on this push has ended for MP Beckamy, but elsewhere, I mean, you know, the Misty Mountains did what they had to. They moved forward, took a lot of the attention away, and Harad has most certainly capitalised on that, because this front line over here has been a very fruitful hunting ground for them. A combination of the more, I was going to say civilised, but I guess disciplined Serpent Guard and the more savage Trollmen, backed up by the phalanx of the Southron Pikemen, the rather cheap phalanx of the Southron Pikemen, has been a winning combination so far for Harad, and they continue to push forward. And it's going to be tricky. It is going to be tricky here for them. The defenders, I mean. The Troll Drummers are here. I mean, this is probably maybe the thing that the Misty Mountains player has done, which maybe I agree a bit less with. The troll drummers should never be in melee like this. They should just be behind the melee engagement because they are uniquely vulnerable as trolls go, alongside something like the troll catapult, because they are rather fragile, and you don't really want to lose the morale boost that they offer any sooner than you have to. Greenway Garrison footman moving forward to try and reinforce this front line. Again, this front line is very stretched, and it's not looking good here for the defenders, I have to say. They have reinforcements, they do have reserves, but I'm not liking the look of this from their perspective, I have to say. Continuing to push forward, and now the elites from Angmar moving forward, Witchrealm Hammer Guard, the Harad Storm Guard. Like I said, I do have some sympathy for Khan because they've had to micro across several fronts. Unfortunately for them, however, I feel as though they haven't done all that well on any front. Remena Bawabrim are here. Royal Legion of Armenelos running amok. The Orc Fodder, ironically, considering how they were sent in first, are still standing. Moran Guard actually winning over here. The few units that Numenor deigned to send over here have actually crumbled in the face of the Moranons, but they're taking pretty grievous losses as well at the hands of the Adunaim Shadowbows. And that's not going to be good for them. Seafarers of Nindamos preventing their forward advance. So yeah, I think that's going to be a Pyrrhic victory for Mordor in the end, especially with the Royal Legion of Armenelos ready to attack from behind. But still, Mordor will probably take what they can get at this point. Harad Storm Guard routing and broken. Again, not too surprising when you consider they were surrounded by Hammer Guard and Barrow-wights. Not exactly where you want to be in life. Goblin Band, victory is a distinct possibility. What have we here? I mean, here they are, sharpshooters rolling forwards. Or rolling backwards, I should say. They're in retreat. And that has to be it. That has to be the play at this point for the defenders. They need to... I think they need to consolidate their force up on this high ground over here and try and make that work for them. Try and get their crossbows and any rangers they may have left into devastating positions and hope that their infantry can hold on to those chokes. Because if they can't, then it's going to be a problem for them, because they've already taken some pretty serious manpower losses. Serpent Guard continuing to move forward, and obviously when morale starts to collapse for Cardolan, it's going to be a cascading failure, you would imagine. Trollmen coming in, a very scary unit to behold, and yeah, without any supporting units on the front line, all of this Cardolan manpower is going to break. So far, so good from the attackers' perspectives, as I said. And all they need to do now, I think, is sort of reorganise themselves and get ready for a final push onto the ground where Caerith and Gold used to stand. Still with units like Demons of the Desert as well. When you still have match winners like that in the back pocket, you know you're in a good place. Remena Bawabrim. I mean, at this point, if I were the attackers, you may as well try and just pour it on. Use your really high tier skirmishers, use your elite infantry. Go forward, really establish yourself against the defenders, who are bound to be in all sorts of... are bound to be flustered at this point, because the battle is certainly not going in their favour at this point in time. Royal Legion of Armenelos are here. Balagar footmen. I mean, the Harad Storm Guard have returned from routing, but 20 of these lads is not going to be enough to reverse the situation as it stands. Balagar archers, meanwhile, will be killed by the Orc Fodder. A rare victory for the Orc Fodder. Over here, meanwhile, again, can't, like, again, it's just positionally. Like, positionally, I'm confused, very confused. Sauron's will and Variag Bowman electing not to retreat to the higher ground, and as a result, they're just going to be, engaged here by Numenorian quality, and they're going to lose. It's just another bizarre decision, and these have mounted up to the point where, like, mistakes for the defenders always do tend to amplify themselves, and I feel as though too many have been made already, to be honest with you. I feel as though, I personally feel as though there's no way back into this for the defenders. I'm more than willing to be wrong, but I feel as though all the attackers need to do is just move forward, overwhelm the defenders, and they'll win. Or just wait for the defenders to make even more mistakes. Just wait for the defenders to deploy their men in. Like, look at this. What is this? Why are your men here? Like, what are they going to accomplish down here? That's a little bit more like it. Move them back. Do they hope to get the Watcher into a position to shoot into a big blob down here? If they're going to do that, they need to do so very quickly. Minotaur Roman Guardian's going to try and fire into some important units, but I think even the strength of Cardolan's crossbows is not going to be enough to salvage this situation at this point in time. That was a blank fire. Down here, meanwhile, again, another unit has been committed down here. Brotherhood of the Axe, like... It's been one of those situations where the defenders just haven't known when to let it go. Archers trying to do their best to shoot into these units, but again, both Numenor and Angmar have got a lot of units which have got good armour and are well shielded, so basic archers like that are not going to be able to deal damage in the quantities that the defenders are going to need at this point. Forward come Numenor, picking up the slack. Obviously a lot of Angmar's army was of a lower tier nature, so they did take grievous losses moving through here. But, well, they were losses that were well thought out. I do think Angmar have done their job very adequately in this battle. Harad and the Misty Mountains over here, meanwhile, again, worked in tandem very well with one another. When the Misty Mountains moved forward, Harad took advantage of that, and vice versa. Both armies, of course, took losses, maybe Misty Mountains a little bit more so, but both of them are also in fighting shape for the late game as they converge on the final stand of the defenders. Rumway Garrison footmen holding on to this choke. Moran on archers. Up here again, maybe not the most damaging unit of archers, but they are shooting into the Southron pikemen, who are incredibly vulnerable to arrow fire, so I mean, they will fill their boots in terms of kills. Meanwhile, what is the Watcher going to do here? I mean, the Watcher, if it can't deploy into a good position to shoot, it's going to be a bit of a waste. We shall see. Variag bowmen retreating. Seafarers of Nindamos sort of wriggling their way in behind enemy lines. I mean, the Brotherhood of the Axe are going to be racking up quite an impressive kill count for themselves against stuff like Seafarers. Unfortunately for them, however, they're also going to have to deal with Pharazim Swordmasters of Royal Legion of Armenelos, and they're going to find themselves overwhelmed there. A lot of AP on the front line, which is probably doing some decent damage, but not enough of it, I don't think. Again, if these Variag bowmen are out of ammunition and you're continuing to fight down there, I'm surprised they're being retreated, because I mean, why are you retreating Variag bowmen and not stuff like Brotherhood of the Axe? Again, it's like the defenders have been under the influence while they've been playing this game. Like, the decisions have made very little sense, to be honest with you. And I think that decision making is going to be what ultimately costs them here. I mean, again, like this cavalry, it's back here, it's alive in the late game, but what's it going to accomplish up here? It's bottled up. It's no threat to anyone, really. The attackers can very easily compensate for that if they decide to try and charge into the front line by just adding some spears or pikes. Bizarre choices. Very, very bizarre. Sauron's will, victory seems certain. That surprises me, actually, considering the quality that's on the front line. The Royal Legion taking a lot of damage at the hands of these AP troops, which I suppose does go to show the Sauron's Will and the Brotherhood of the Axe together are quite a scary double act. The Temple Guard are also in there as well, offering some quality. But there's not much of them left. Here we go. That was... They're actually getting a lot of friendly fire there, the Watcher, which is not great for them. Friendly fire on Dunedain captains as well. Oh dear. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. They managed to rout some Haradrim archers, but that wasn't worth carving into the manpower. Again, like, 4 losses on Dunedain captains is one thing, but it just adds to the comedy of errors that has been this defence so far. Royal Legion of Armenelos at this point are very depleted, but Witchrealm Hammer Guard adding themselves to the front line as well as Blackguard. In terms of pure quality, the attackers should still be fine, but to be fair, the defenders have put up more of a fight over on this side than I thought they would, which speaks well of the Sauron's Will and the Brotherhood of the Axe, and the Temple Guard, although the Temple Guard were quite depleted. In come some Javelin men that were out of ammunition. Nomadic Marauders, not exactly the heroes this front line needed. A little bit surprised that some of these units aren't being used to go around, to be honest with you, but there's still reinforcements back here. There's still Blackwatch Legion. And there's, well, to be fair, there's also still Storm Guard. And a few units of Mordors that have returned from routing. Again, this could be... Oh boy, that screen shake. But I mean, now that they're not shooting their own men, that Hwacha could be incredibly useful at thinning out some of this manpower. Maybe not so much into Goblin Archers and Harad Archers though, they need to go after something a little bit more high profile than that. They can't shoot into the front line though, because they'll just mow down their own defenders, which they don't want to do any more of, certainly. Minhiriath Sharpshooters shooting, and the Demons of the Desert are here. And you know what? You know, the defenders are making up a bit of ground here. I still don't think it'll be enough when push comes to shove, but they are doing damage here. Their crossbows maybe don't have the best line of sight, but they are doing damage. Heavy Goblin crossbows are moving in as well, though. There's still reinforcements back here, including stuff like Champions of Neferat. Which, considering the fact that most of the elites have been committed over here to try and blunt Numenor, which, to be fair, they have kind of managed to achieve. Variag Bowmen are up here. Also, they did still have ammunition. I thought because their weapons were out, they actually had they didn't have ammo, but they do, and they're here, doing what they can. But pushing further forwards now, Gundabad Guard getting up into the face of the nomadic marauders yet again. Barrow Whites are still on the front line. Very impressive performance by the Brotherhood of the Axe, though. Earning their keep, and they're actually normally the kind of unit which you actually struggle to pay for because they're so expensive for what they are, but in this situation, when they're optimally used, and even then I would say optimally used is maybe a bit strong considering. Goblin Infantry back here, MP Beckham making sure that his general is very much safe. Meanwhile, I mean, we are into the final 10,000 frames here, so this is the sharp end of the battle. I still think that the losses they suffered early on, the defenders, will make it virtually impossible for them to come back and win this, but I suppose I have seen stranger things happen in the game before, and they do have quite a nice defensive position, to be fair to them. I mean, this is... Ooh, I'm not so sure about this. I mean, this could be the moment where the Vengeful One kills... Yeah. Like, look at this. He's doing a lot of damage to his own Chieftains Vanguard and to his own allies' front line. Well, I mean, routing from the Misty Mountains because of their low morale, and the Harad March is obviously routing as well, but the Heavy Goblin Crossbows, I suppose, with the Heavy Goblin Crossbows right here, it's... I mean, you may as well have done something, because if you just stood there, the Heavy Goblin Crossbows would have killed them all anyway. Trying to make something happen with the Hwachas, so I kind of understand why the Vengeful One did that ultimately. Over here, meanwhile, I give credit for the defenders, and especially to those armor-piercing shock troops they sent forward with the Temple Guard, because they really have depleted Angmar and Numenor quite a lot. I do still think ultimately victory will go to the Numenorians and to Angmar over here, but they gave a good accounting of themselves. The Nurad Windblades could also make themselves a bit of a nuisance up here. I still don't think it's where they would have been their most useful, but again, no matter. Chieftains Vanguard still alive in spite of the fact they took their own rockets to the back. More reinforcements heading forward as well. Snaga Skirmish is going to try and get into position. Beast Tamers as well as some Serpent Guard. Moranon Archers have somehow found themselves all the way down here. But of course they're going to find themselves cut to pieces as well by the Haradrim for their troubles. No concern at all for them. Variags. Dismounted Serpent Guard as well. Haradrim Archers. I mean, yeah, you can... The fact they still have some healthy Trollmen and Champions of Neferat at the back here is always going to be a concern, because the defenders can only keep this up for so long. The whistle of javelins here and there. Ugh, just needed to stretch. Yeah, Goblin King's Bodyguard. Moving forward, I wonder how long it will be before Bannerlord starts to see Lord of the Rings mods come into being. Not long, I'm guessing, albeit to the point where they would be playable would be a long time, I would imagine. No matter. Minotaur, Roman Gatekeepers. Up here, still probably the best chance for anything meaningful to happen for them. Ugh. I mean, Romena, Numenorians are up here, doing their thing. Windblades are here. I'm not sure what Angmar are doing. Like, were there desyncs in this battle? because there have been some very, very weird movements from both sides. Very weird. I wonder if deleting the unique settlements folder for Minas Tirith is what's causing the issue here. Because maybe the fortress should be here. And maybe that's the problem. Wild, to be sure. I mean, I don't think it would have mattered too much, because, I mean, just having a look at this battle, I do feel as though the attackers would have won anyway. But, I mean, it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to hear from the players who played in this one whether this was actually how it went down. There's some very strange decisions from both sides. In come the Harad Windblades. Like, this is an example of a very strange decision. Decision. Get my words out properly. Charging headlong into pikemen with a unit of cavalry. Who can say? Who can say? Regardless, I think actually, considering the pace of this battle, it might actually be worthwhile turning up to ×2 speed, to be honest with you, because things have gone a little bit chaotic. Well, things have gone so chaotic that I feel as though it's worthwhile. I mean, to be fair though, like the Hwacha, if there was a desync, if the fortress was here, this Hwacha fire would not actually be hitting these units; it would be hitting the walls. So I can only assume that isn't the problem, but there may very well have been desyncs. Big damage done in there to the heavy goblins though, and the Hwacha may as well continue to fire, because if it doesn't, it's not going to have the chance to, because it will be engaged in melee. It's a lot of damage for the Hwacha. Dunedain Captain still doing the business on the front line against the dismounted Serpent Guard, and now it's the attackers' turn to really lose the plot. So I mean, Angmar are just here. What are Angmar doing? Like, surely this isn't what MSQ intended. Yeah, there's got to be some weirdness going on in this battle. I was kind of confused as to why the Steward of Dale was engaging in the moves he was engaging in. It's a bit of a shame. Again, if a battle is heavily desynced like this, it might be a good idea to just not bother sending it across, because it can be... I mean, maybe it isn't desynced. Maybe this is just exactly how it played out, in which case it was... I don't know, were they passing around a bong while they were playing? Wild. Dismounted Serpent Guard, I mean, they're getting cut to ribbons by the Minotaur Roman Guardians, and the defenders may very well go on to win this now. They shouldn't have, by any means, but they may very well do. Dunedain Captains, finally only 2 of them remaining as the Trollmen come forward. The Hwacha being engaged by some Serpent Guard. They're going to be... well, the Snaga Skirmish is almost immediately rout, but no matter. Gundabad Guard are here. What a very weird and wonderful battle this has been. Forward come the Minhiria sharpshooters to shore things up, but see, some of the moves that are being made are legit, but some of them aren't. It's one of the reasons why I'm quite confused. See, the Champions of Nafrat have moved forward and now just stopped dead in their tracks. The Goblin Infantry are going to come forward as well. Be interesting to see if the defenders do have what it takes to kill off the Champions of Nafrat, to be honest with you. See, Angmar are now moving again. They're moving again. So, I mean, MSQ2 was the one who sent me the replay, so it's not as if he could have left the game or desynced or disconnected or anything. So his units are just stood here, waiting for some grand invitation, I suppose? I don't know. It's been a very, very odd thing indeed. Regardless, I do still think the quality of the Trollmen should be too much. Although I say that, they are losing. Losing the battle for the time being. They do have a regular unit of Trollmen in there as well though, so I think they should have the quality and depth. And over here now, Angmar are moving forwards, to give them their credit. There's still that Blackwatch Legion that aren't moving. There's still the Storm Guard over on the other side of there as well. My. What a time this has been. Yeah, I mean, Goblin King Bodyguard, yeah, the attackers will win this, ultimately, you would think. But it's been a very strange way to go about it, is all I'm saying. Yeah, that is true. Minotaur Roman Guardians can try their best, but they're not going to be enough to beat the two strongest Witch Realm units. And over here, the Trollmen are just going to have far too much for the remaining Minhiriats. So Sigma Cyphers is going to put on this last stand, but it will ultimately be an unsuccessful last stand. Again, to disengage from Angmar is another highly questionable decision. Do they think they can genuinely win over on this side? Well, there goes a rout. Minotaur Roman Gatekeeper's on the verge of being destroyed as well. Hearthguard of Amon-Sul still just stood there. Chieftains Vanguard. Yeah, the fact that the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul just sort of stood here like lemons is another indication, perhaps, that this battle wasn't entirely mechanically sound, which is a bit of a shame. But nonetheless, it was still functional, I suppose, as a watch. It was also the closest thing I had to a lore-friendly battle. I've been sent a lot of battles, actually, from Sin and Eclipse, but they've been the kind of battles where there's been no sort of rhyme or reason to the factions that were chosen, which people often kind of respond to less positively, even if the battles themselves, I'm sure, are of very good quality. So we'll probably be getting to those in the course of the next week before Bannerlord comes along. Really looking forward to Bannerlord as well, because some new life desperately needs to be injected into my channel, I think. And hopefully Bannerlord can be that. Would they come yet again? The Hearthguard of Amon-Sul still just sort of hanging out. There goes the Khandish General. Javelins from the Snaga killing him off. Alright, so who wants to kill off the Hearthguard then? One of you needs to. Let's end this fast quickly. Times 6 speed. No? No takers? This to me tells me there was a desync. There has to have been a desync if this is what's happening at this point. Which is a shame. There they go. He admitted defeat. Which is good. I mean, again, if a battle is this heavily desynced, I'd rather not have to go through the rigmarole of recording it, to be honest. Maybe it is the unique settlements folder being deleted, though, that has made the difference. It is very possible that that is the case. To make Minas Tirith work, maybe I broke this replay by accident, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. This is the only time. I'm not going to re-record it with the unique settlements folder active, because I simply don't have the time to do that. It was still a functional battle anyway, in spite of the way it sort of descended into madness at the end, and the way that it was kind of weird all throughout, to be honest with you. But ultimately, even in spite of that, it kind of went the way I expected. I think the attackers, composition-wise, you know, positionally, I think they had the advantages here, and I think it was the expected result ultimately. We can't see what the kills were like, but again, I would imagine the usual suspects getting the most kills. Ranged units, Brotherhood of the Axe from Khand probably racking up a very healthy kill count for themselves. And yeah, really not much more to say about that. I mean, thank you to MSQ2 for sending it to me nonetheless, and I'm sorry if I broke it by deleting the unique settlements folder to get Minas Tirith to work. But it is what it is. Big thank you to all the players as well for being a part of it. Obviously some familiar faces in the Steward of Dale and Sin. Some less familiar ones as well in the shape of Sigma Cyphers. As I said, next battle may very well be one of the sort of pick and mix style field battles that Sin or Eclipse has sent me. Like I said, not lore friendly at all. Factions all over the damn place, which again is kind of difficult to make a theme for a battle like that, which is one of the reasons why I tend to actually put them lower down on the priority list. Because yeah, I mean, mechanically speaking, there's a lot more going on when you do something like that, but people tend to respond to them less positively than they do a more lore friendly engagement, or at least one that has a more clear theme. But that just is what it is. I think, you know, we will be seeing them, of course, because they are likely to be very high quality affairs, and I do want to show them as well, because there were quite a few of them that were sent, and off on a very healthy variety of maps as well, so there is always that. But as I said, moving forward, Bannerlord I think is one thing I really can't wait for, because it's something that I sorely need to maintain enthusiasm, because again, just sort of mulching my way through Third Age content is all well and good. But as I said in one of the previous replays, albeit because of as a result of it crashing several times, that isn't the case this time. But the point remains that continuously doing replays in this game leaves me with very little desire to play it. which is why I kind of feel bad when someone asks me to, hey, do you want to play Third Age Reforged? My answer will inevitably be no, because I see so much of it in the replays that I want to do anything else, which is, again, a bit of a shame. So that's why variety is important, because need to evolve or die, I think, this channel. And again, like, it is interesting times, because this is the sort of thing I will talk about in a little bit more detail in a channel update, but in all likelihood, things are going to change for me fairly substantially towards the end of September, beginning of October. Now, that's a fairly long way off at the moment, of course. That's still more than half a year away, but it is still something that's worth considering now, because the way that things have been going for quite a while at this point, for the last 2 to 3 years with regards to the channel, sort of slowly plodding along as it has been, will not be the case after that. I can say that for certain. The channel won't be going anywhere, of course. The channel will still continue, but changes will have to be made, and you know, it might be best to do them sooner rather than later, to be honest with you. But we'll see. Again, like, Bannerlord is sort of first and foremost in my mind, because obviously it allows me to diversify, but also the structure of my channel may very well need to change, which is why a channel update video will be forthcoming, I think, fairly soon. It may already have actually happened, to be honest with you, based on how far ahead I record replays, and based on the relevance of the channel update, which will need to happen on the weekend before Bannerlord releases. The channel update may very well all have happened, and I'm just sort of repeating myself, albeit in a more truncated version. But yeah, regardless, that is something that will be happening, or will have happened. Not quite sure yet. As for the next replay, like I said, it will probably be another one of Sins. It may even be the Björn replay that I sent, but obviously they're big, and obviously I need to really psych myself up to do a replay like that nowadays. So that is actually a lore-friendly one as well. So yeah, but I've done these maps so often at this point that, you know, injecting a bit of freshness into them can be a little tricky sometimes. But Björn is a good one. So maybe that one next, depending on what my schedule is looking like for the coming week. If not, then we'll do one of Sin's more manageable sort of 30k frame field battles, 4v4s, or we could do the like 50k frame Björn siege, depending on my availability. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.